Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us here on Counting Sheep with Richard Kirkham. Tonight's show is brought to you by the Lambcast. The Lambcast, where movie lovers come to talk. Also by The Lamb, the king of movie websites. On tonight's show, Richard's special guests are comedian and water diviner Jason Soto, author and exorcist Lisa Leaheey, Escapologist and tarot card reader Matthew Simpson, and juggling brewmaster Nick Rehak. And now your host, Richard Kirkham. Hey, I love this audience, but let's face it, our marriage would end over irreconcilable differences by the end of the show. Yeah, that's right. I'm the Vladimir Putin of talk shows. My jokes die of accidents as soon as they're spoken. All of you listening at home, it's 11:30 p.m. Do you know where your sheep are? We have a great show for you tonight. Nick Rehak is with us, and we'll do some beer juggling later. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, look out for the glass.
Lisa Leaheey is here. She has a book out now, Repo Woman, the girl who dated the devil twice. Hey, Lisa.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
After he escapes from this milk can, Matthew Simpson will be doing a reading for all of us using tarot cards cursed by a witch. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Pleasure to be here. It's all looking good in the cards.
And finally, sharing jokes that didn't work at the Legion Hall last weekend, he'll also be hosting our discussion for today, Jason Soto.
That is probably the most accurate description of me I've ever heard in my life.
Actually, this is Lambcast episode 732, the May movie of the month. I am Richard Kirkham, but I'm the host of the Lambcast, not a late-night show in the 1970s. Our movie of the month is Late Night with the Devil. October 31st, 1977, Johnny Carson rival Jack Delroy hosts a syndicated talk show, Night Owls, that has long been trusted companion to insomniacs around the country. A year after the tragic death of Jack's wife, ratings have plummeted. Desperate to turn his fortunes around, Jack plans a Halloween special like no other, unaware that he's about to unleash evil into the living rooms of America. Jason, you're the film's champion. That makes you this late-night show director. Take it away.
I am, yes. This is the second time I've ever won a movie of the month, and it was with a horror movie that can only be found on Shudder. So that must be my wheelhouse, apparently. Now I know how to win. Too. You were. That's how we met. That was the day you
was that host
for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yes, it was host.
Lisa's going to find a time machine and make herself not show up on that episode, and her life will be so much better. I have a starting question for everybody. It's going to sound like it's unrelated, but I promise it's related in a way. How familiar are you guys with the show Family Guy?
Not very familiar.
Very familiar?
There's a gag in Family Guy where it has the main guy, Peter, in a movie theater. And the joke is supposed to be there's all these production cards at the beginning before the movie. And I had a flashback to that bit when this movie started. I thought it was mostly going to be production title cards. It just would never stop.
It was fantastic. I saw this in the theater, and we all were chuckling. Because we all were like, okay, what's going on here?
Like, I thought it was like a prank or something.
9 vanity cards came up.
Outstanding.
I counted them. I could not believe it. I was like, holy criminy. I enjoyed the animated one.
I like the future one where it says it was established in 2068. That made me laugh.
That was a good one too.
That was one where I thought this has to be a prank. Like there's something going on that I'm not getting. No, but then okay, so the movie itself, what drew me in, and I don't know if anyone else is familiar with this film, but there's a movie called the WNUF Halloween Special. It's a very low budget film made by just two guys who kind of just made the movie themselves. And the crux of that movie, and tell me if this sounds familiar, is you're watching a taped episode of a news special that aired on Halloween night, but in the 80s, where gradually as the night that the movie goes on, things are just kind of not right. Like it starts very innocently enough. And then eventually down the road when all the terrible shit happens in the movie. I love this movie to death. I love WNUF Halloween Special. I recommend it. It's really easy to find. But when I saw the trailer for this, I was getting those vibes. Anyone else?
Well,
I don't watch trailers, so I can't help you.
Yeah, and I saw this without seeing a trailer. I think it just came recommended by somebody, and I thought, well, that'll be good. It looks interesting. I'm into that 70s vibe, and so I was encouraged without having a trailer.
Yay! Come to the dark side, Richard.
Never going to happen.
What about you, Nick?
The thing that drew me to this was I just like David Dastmalchian. I think it's hopefully how you say his name. I like seeing when he pops up. So I'm like, oh, he's going to do his own thing here. So I'm like, why not? And it just so happened to be playing at a theater nearby at a reasonable time for me to see it. So I went.
Okay. And what about you, Matt?
Similar, actually. I first heard about this movie at a festival late in last year, and I tried to get a screener for it because it was a festival I was covering remotely, and they said no. And then like 3 more festivals had it after that, and all of them would not give me a home screener. So it sort of became 2 things. One, I really like David Dastmalchian, and also I was told no for so long that when it finally came out, I was actually super hyped to see it.
Welcome to the life of a horror fan.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, apparently this had I guess it does still have a theatrical run, but it was co-produced. One of the many producers of this film was Shudder. And that's where you can see it now. But I've not seen this in the theater, so I don't know if the experience would be different there. But this is kind of the movie that I feel like plays well on a streaming service because of the way the movie's formatted. Because it's formatted it starts off like it's a documentary about Jack and the show Night Owls and the night everything went wrong. With the voiceover by Michael Ironside, which I didn't catch until the end. Because people say that they're like face blind. I guess I'm voice deaf because I don't know a voice until someone tells me that's the voice. Like at the end of the movie, that's when I find out, oh, that was Chris Pratt playing that. Oh, okay. And I did not at all catch that. So I didn't know this was Michael Ironside until the credit hit at the end. And I was like, that's an interesting choice for a voiceover guy. He's not normally known for his voiceover work. But the movie's framed kind of like a found footage or, the lost episode of a show and only a few people taped it. And I'm into shit like that as well.
You've got that X-Files episode that they try to hide.
Yeah. Yep. Basically, it has like that vibe to it. Like this is like something, it was recorded and only aired once, and now only a few people have this. Nick and I are very familiar with that, actually.
Just a little bit. And maybe we'll talk about that later. Who knows?
Oh, ooh, nice. Okay, cool. And so what I like about the movie is if it plays out like an episode of this talk show, but we get the info dump of what the show is. It's a late night talk show. hosted by this guy Jack, and he's doing okay, but he's like number 2 or number 3 in the ratings, and he can't beat Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson's the one you got to beat. And so through various means, I'm sure we'll get into, he ends up being somewhat popular, but he needs to win the sweeps. That's also happening on Halloween, and so he brings in a bunch of not necessarily spooky people, but like kind of supernaturalist kind of ways. Like we got like a psychic who claims he can like talk to like the dead, but he's basically just John Edwards. If I remember who John Edwards is. I'm gonna make a lot of old references tonight.
Yeah,
so.
John Edwards is not that old a reference.
Well,
it's
we're
20 years
old.
since
That's
the show
the
was
difference.
on.
So yes.
I was in my 20s when John Edwards was a thing, and I'm 44, so just to put
we're all old, so yes.
some context into that.
Well, I'll give you older references later on when you talk about some of these other characters.
Oh yeah. There's that guy too. Yeah, there's a skeptic on the show who used to be a magician.
Yeah,
but
Carmichael
now
Haig.
He questions everything. And he basically keeps like interrupting everything that's happening to prove like that it's fake. And I know this is based on that guy that, I can't think of his name right now.
James Randi.
Yeah, that guy who was a real life guy who was like, if you could prove you're a psychic, I'll give you like $1 million. And that's basically this guy in this movie, because he even has a check for like $1 million in his pocket that he's like willing to give to somebody, which plays off very well in the end, I gotta say. But yeah, that's enough of me yapping. Someone else talk for a minute about this movie.
All right. Well, I'm happy to talk for a minute about the movie. Like most films that I cover on my site, I saw it in a theater. I try to see movies in theaters rather than at home on the television streaming. And although this kind of fits because of the way the screen is formatted, because of the nature of the show, I know that it plays better in a theater because you're not looking away, you're not distracted by anything. There are some moments that are a little dull and tiresome because it's all this stuff that happens behind the scenes kind of thing, and you're going, oh, well, let's get back to the creepy stuff. But that's the stuff that makes it a television show, and I like the way that they did. It's maybe pretty straightforward. All of the inserts of backstage material are in black and white compared to the kind of reproduced color palette of the 1970s TV shows that they used for most of the program. I thought it worked really well on the big screen, and the sound was incredible. And when you're in a theater and it's dark all around, everything gets creepier. I know it's great to be at home sometimes under a blanket and curled up watching something scary, but it's a lot scarier when you're in the theater and you can't escape. I like that a lot. And so the circumstances under which I first saw it, I accidentally saw it in a theater. I had seen that it was a Netflix show, or it was not Netflix but Shudder, and I knew it was streaming. I planned on watching it, and then I went down to the Alamo, and it was there. And I said, well, what am I not doing? Why am I not seeing this in a theater? And so I booked tickets and went, I think, the next night because we were seeing something else that day. And I encourage everybody to see it in a theater. By the way, I don't want to give away the ending here. I'll give away the ending of the show. So far, this year, this is my favorite film.
Yay!
Huh. Wow.
Okay.
So early in the year.
I'm going to echo what Richard is getting at here because, I made the joke to Matthew about like, welcome to being a horror fan, and where I am in Southern New England, I don't typically have access to the really small limited releases, despite being somewhat I'm close to Boston. I'm within driving distance of New York City, but I mean, I'm not going to drive to New York City to see a movie. It's hard where I am in Rhode Island to see some of these more limited releases. So in hearing what this was, I'm a sucker for any kind of exorcism, possession kind of story. I'm also a sucker for found footage, so this one was right up my alley from the beginning. I was just happy that it was playing at my theaters. And so, off I went to go see it. And I thank films like Skinamarink for actually going to the theater, because now people are seeing, or I'm kind of surprised that they don't realize this to begin with. But then again, production companies don't think women go to the theater. So why would horror fans go to the theater? They're seeing that there is an audience for these smaller independent horror films. And so by putting them in the theater, they make more money, etc. But thrilled to get to go see it. And it was me and maybe 4 other people in the theater. But, we all shared the chuckle at looking at the production cards, and we all got to share and, sitting in the theater and seeing this movie unfold on screen, which is always better, I think, than seeing it at home. I'm with you, Richard, on that. Although I will say that Skinamarink is better at home, because you can turn off all your lights, you can put on some sound canceling headphones and hear every last little creak and sound very, very well. So it's amazing, Nick. Oh, it's the best way to do it. But anyway, I thought this film was just fantastic. It was so much fun. Like you guys, I love Desmalkian in this. I think that he's definitely cemented his sort of purview in film as being one of those guys who, if he's in it, he makes it better. Like that John Goodman kind of thing. Like if John Goodman pops up, he's going to make it better. I think Desmalkian is doing the same thing at this point. He was really the only decent thing in the last voyage of the Demeter for me. But his character, Jack Delroy, just his personality, his general state of being is just fantastic. You can tell that he loves what he does. You can tell that he's got that charm, like I definitely would have watched him on TV, and I definitely would have gotten a kick out of him, and I would have believed everything he said as sincere. He talks about in the beginning of the film how this show is for you, the viewers at home, and it's like you believe him. I mean, Carson was everybody's favorite, and they thought he was great. But I see Carson, I see Jay Leno, I see Letterman, all these other people. I'm dating myself right there. Even Jimmy Fallon and all these other guys, I see them as, they're show hosts and they're being funny and they've got their shtick. Whereas Jack Delroy was like, I just want to sit and chat with you. Come sit with me and let's talk to this guy over here. And I think there's something to that. And what makes that so important is when a character like that is in danger, you actually care. So finding that he's in some kind of danger as things amp up, finding that Gus is kind of awkward in his sidekick sort of view, and you can tell they've got their riffs. You care enough about these characters that when things start to really go bad, you're completely drawn into it. And it would be that thing that you couldn't change the channel from, that you wouldn't be able to look away from, which is exactly what this demon wants you to do. So I've seen it now about 4 times. When did it come out? 2 months ago? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a fan. I'm waiting for them to release this on VHS so I can buy a copy. So we'll see. I have Skinamarink already.
I technically own this on VHS.
You own a cover of it.
No. That's the actual movie he's in it.
Oh, they taped it onto it?
Did you get one of those umbrella things that's coming?
I don't think that comes with a VHS copy of it. I think it's just the Blu-ray and like all this other fun stuff.
Yeah, I'll buy the Blu-ray, but I want the VHS as well.
I mean, yeah, I think somewhere down the line there is probably going to be like an actual VHS copy, and I will be buying that as well. But right now, I can say I do have this on VHS. Technically,
you and your pirated silliness.
I'm not, for the record, I don't know if it's pirated. I'm just going to say that for legal reasons. Nope, legal reasons. FBI can't touch me. I'm also recording this in the Bahamas, so.
Yes, totally. Great signal.
Thank you.
You're going to send us a picture of that VHS so I can put it in the video?
I will, absolutely.
Thank you.
I sure will. I want to hear from Nick because I know Nick very well, and he's not a horror guy. So I kind of want to hear, Nick, your thoughts about this movie, what you thought of it, and all the how terrified were you when you've seen this?
I wasn't really terrified. I discovered it was either earlier this year or late last year. I was listening to Movies, Films, and Flicks, and Lisa and Mark were talking about Midsommar, and they were talking more heavily about the idea of dread and what that does in horror film. And something clicked, and I'm like, oh, that's what I like in films is dread, and that's what I kind of gravitate towards when I watch films like The Shining, even bits of There Will Be Blood. There's this dread that's there, and that's kind of what I've been seeking out in my horror films when I go to look for it. And when I saw this, I didn't think there would be like a whole lot of dread to it, but what I did really like was the found footage aspect of it, was kind of looking at talk shows kind of how they used to be, right? Like growing up, we know like Leno, Letterman, Conan, Jimmy, and all that and stuff. But to like go back to kind of the times of like Jack Parr and Dick Cavett and people where it was like, hey, we're just going to get a couple people in here and start having this conversation about something, rather than, hey, so-and-so is going to come on here. They're going to hawk this thing that they're doing. Oh, yeah, there's a funny story. And then boom, off you go. Or, hey, we're going to do drinking games. And then boom, off you go. And I get it. It's the changing tides. It's the changing tastes and what people want. But to kind of see them go back to that idea of just like hanging out and having a conversation, or like the idea of sweeps week, right? Nobody does sweeps week anymore. Everybody's just looking for something that's viral. So to kind of go and take a step back and look at the older style of that, it felt really nostalgic, even coming from someone that didn't really grow up with that type of talk show, but kind of yearned and longed for that type of show. So really it was, let's see how they take this and then put a little horror slant on it. When I saw it first thing in the morning on a Sunday, a handful of people in the theater, some of them smelled as if they were under the influence of some things. And that heightened their experience and made them laugh harder, which made everybody else kind of giggle in moments and be a little worried in others. But as I'm watching this, I'm like, man, this is like one souped up Adult Swim, like out of nowhere program that would show up. Like this could be 11:30 on a Saturday night, and all of a sudden this just shows up on Adult Swim, and you just have an absolute ball with it. There's some spooky moments for sure, and there's some genuinely like, ugh, not a fan of that. But overall, it's just enjoyable. I don't want to say fun is the word, but there's just something enjoyable here. That's something that's bringing you in, and it checks off a lot of different boxes. You've got Bohemian Grove, you've got demon possession stuff, you got found footage. There's just a lot that this encompasses in such a small and tight package, and it just does it well.
Yeah, I like I'm with you with the feel of the film, because one thing I think it does very well is it does have the look and like structure and feel of a 70s like talk show. Now, I was born in like 1980, so I missed all of this live in action. But, you know, I have seen like old clips of Johnny Carson and, you know, Jack Parr and all that you mentioned. And they did a really good job with the set design on this movie. It's very 70s, and it really could fool like somebody if you didn't know this was a movie, you didn't know who the lead was. And he's like the only famous person, I'll put that in quotes, like quote unquote famous person in the movie. So you could kind of pass this off if someone's not familiar with him as like, hey, look at this episode from a talk show that happened in the 70s, man. And it was like, you know, he was popular, but then something terrible happened. Now they wiped his existence off of the face of the planet in this last episode.
Blair Witch it.
Yeah, like it almost feels like this could be like a Blair Witch like style type of like promotion to it. Like this really happened. Because they did such a good job with everything. With the structure. Now, we haven't heard from Matt yet. I want to hear about Matt. Like, what did you think about the movie and everything?
I really liked it, actually. Again, part of that was just maybe being on the hype train, but when I did finally see it, I was like, okay, yeah, I get what people are saying. I love that it starts with Michael Ironside narrating, who I recognized immediately because he has such a distinct voice, and also because he's a Canadian national treasure. And I don't know, maybe it's the Canadian in me, but like if he's in something, it's automatically just better. Along with David Desmalchian, and it was I I just need to echo everything that's being said so far. Really, like I love the vibe. I love the performances. I especially like Ian Bliss as Carmichael, the skeptic. I've only really seen Ian Bliss in 2 other movies, the Matrix sequels, and he has a very distinct vibe about him that I really appreciate. And I really liked his one big sequence where he's doing the hypnosis. I thought was one of the stronger and probably the most, quote, like horrifying part of the movie. And most effective part of the movie in terms of like the scares or the dread that's been spoke of so far. And I'm just really happy that David Dastmalchian is getting his moment. He had 4 movies that he starred in that came out last year, technically, and they've all been, in my opinion, they've all been at least good. And I'm really glad that he is, having his moment to come out and be a leading man and not just that quirky guy who shows up and makes stuff better. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I wish I saw it at home on Shudder, and I wish that I had a chance to see it in a cinema. And if one comes up, I'll probably take it.
Yeah, I'm curious about seeing this in the theaters. I live in Indianapolis, and we're just not the market for that, for this kind of movie. Unfortunately, I'd have to probably go to Chicago if I want to. But yeah, I was fine watching it at home. And I actually got to watch it with someone who's not really into horror movies as much, and she was kind of getting into it because of the talk show angle of it. And then when the creepy stuff started to kind of rear its head, like when the psychic dude starts like vomiting the black stuff all over everybody, that's when she was out. she was like, all right, deuces, I'm out. But she was getting into like the talk show angle of it and the whole like documentary at the beginning about, he was struggling, and then he's in this secret club with like other powerful guys, and then not so long after that, his wife gets a form of cancer, lung cancer, but she's never smoked. Yeah. And so then his ratings go up because he has her on the show, and then she passes away. He's off the air for a few months, and then he comes back. And now he needs to prove himself as a talk show host. Like the setup to this whole thing was. And then we get like the little bit of the cult in the movie that worships Abraxas. I'm a fan of the Jesse the Body Ventura movie as a next guy, but making a whole cult about it is a little far, and I'm the only one who's laughing at that joke because I'm me, and I don't care. That joke was just for me. I don't care if you guys didn't get it. I don't care. I'm laughing, damn it. Anyway, go check out Abraxas starring Jesse the Body Ventura. There's a cult, right? And then they get raided by the FBI, so they burn their church down, but only one girl survives, and she says she's got a demon inside of her. And so Jack is like, bring the demon girl on the show, and we'll have the demon come on our show. And that's a wonderful idea, right, guys?
Great TV. Great TV.
That's a beautiful idea. Actually, it's kind of a neat idea. It would be kind of neat to see that in real life.
I would watch it.
Yeah, 100%. If Jimmy Fallon came on like my Instagram right now and said, "Hey, tomorrow night I'm gonna have like this girl possessed by Satan show up in the body of like Demi Lovato," I'd be like, "Oh hell yeah, I'm there. Let's do this."
We've had television shows based on alien autopsies and opening Al Capone's vault. Why not?
Makes sense to me.
So those were fake, Richard. Come on, this is real. I'm talking about real life.
Al Capone's vault was real. It was just empty.
It was just empty. Yeah.
A whole lot of nothing.
Yeah. So okay. One button about this movie is that this is probably one of the few movies that came out in recent years that uses practical effects. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Huge fan of practical effects. I mean, at this point, we've gotten to where CGI looks cartoonish. Like this, and I also think that our age plays into it, but like there's a nostalgia for practical effects because you see the craft and the talent behind what these individuals can do. Mm-hmm. And I would rather just go back to that, like I don't need something to look hyper realistic where in fact most CGI looks ridiculous at this point. Like we can tell that it's not real and it does take you out. I'd rather be taken out of the movie world by saying, wow, that looks really good. They did a good job. As opposed to, oh, I see where that computer did that. Okay, great. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't feel authentic
it feels organic and part of what you're looking at when it is a practical effect. And, if the girl's levitating off of the ground and, it's okay, maybe they hid the wires really well, that's okay. That's still better than if they had just had her as a CGI image that they were manipulating in a computer. It still looks more real, despite the fact that we know that it's not, and it, that there's an element of fakery to it. It still comes off more authentic.
Absolutely. I like that word that you used, organic. That's a great way of putting it.
I think what's interesting is like CGI in horror movies looks terrible because horror movies already get like the lower end of the budget anyway. They don't give a lot of money to horror movies, so they don't have a lot of money to spend on like CGI. So a lot of like movies that use CGI blood looks friggin' awful. Or like if someone's head explodes, it looks really fake. But like if it's used like in like an action movie or something that it has a bigger of a budget, like the Marvel movies get a lot of shit for it being mostly CGI, and yes it is, but it's really hard to tell in some parts because they got the bigger budget. They're a little more professional about it. But when it's done in a horror movie, they don't got like the better computers, I guess, and so it just looks like, Tom and Jerry's heads got cut off. Like it looks that fake. But them using like the practical effects here, I think works wonderfully because like they actually like levitated the girl in the chair, or like they use like makeup effects for like when the dude's head turns or all that like stuff. Like, I think they do such a wonderful job with it, and I'm glad they went with the practical effects on this, 100%.
I mean, I think computer-generated stuff would be out of place here, too, because it's a 70s setting.
Right.
And it would have been that much sillier to just place it in with this particular time period and what's going on, and it just wouldn't feel right.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like this. It will take you out of the 70s feel of everything. Absolutely.
I'm just going to pop in here and say that there are digital effects in this movie, though.
Yeah.
They're just deployed really well. Like, there's...
Right.
I don't want to spoil the ending of the movie, but, like, there's a pretty big digital effect at the end, and it's really well deployed. And that is the key with any special effects. Like, it's interesting because I've come to a place in my life where, like, I don't really care whether an effect is digital or practical as long as it's the best version of the effect that it can be. And I think that oftentimes practical is the answer. And I really appreciate practical effects, but like there's stuff you can just do with digital you can't with practical, and there's a number of examples of that in this movie. And I just want to point out that they are there, and they're really well done. So I think it's a matter of just like how you choose the tool for the task, right?
Well, I think some of those digital effects are, interestingly enough, designed to look like they're photo effects at the end as opposed to just being computer effects, which again fits with that time period theme. So when we get the big climax and we're getting, heads split open and demons popping out and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't look like it's a digital effect, even though it is, because it's been made to look like it's a photo effect from that era, and on television with the kinds of videotape that they were using in those days, which I think kind of enhances the way it looks. But I'd agree with Matthew. You want the effect that works. What we're recognizing, though, is sometimes the practical effect is the one that works.
I mean, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying I feel like maybe I'm just being cranky in the morning because it's earlier here than for most of you. And I stayed up late rewatching this movie, so there's that. But I just find a lot of these conversations we sort of discount digital effects as if they're lesser than, and I just don't think that's true. So maybe that's all I'm trying to get at.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely a time and place for like CGI and digital effects. I'm not trying to say that like, you know, we shouldn't have them. It's just sometimes, you know, they get overused often. And so when you see a movie like this where they finally are like, okay, we're going to use a lot more practical effects. We're going to use makeup and all this stuff, which seems to be like a forgotten art by this point, you know, in time. Because like in the 80s, like 80s horror movies, like people look fondly on them, not because the plots were great or the acting was wonderful. It was all about the effects. It was all about the makeup jobs. It was all about seeing, you know, Wilford Brimley's head on an alien being like hanged at like a 90-degree angle and chasing after Kurt Russell. You know, that's what it was all about. And so, you know, when you're going through movies in the 2010s and 20s and everything's just done on a computer, it's really refreshing to see, okay, they use makeup effects and practical effects. I think it, you know, it looks good. It just looks good.
And as a horror fan, you know, like, yes, you're absolutely right, Matt, that there are definitely places for the CGI, but when you're watching a lot of horror and smaller films and they use the CGI, it's never to the caliber that like some of the bigger tentpole films will use them because they've got the budget for them. Whereas like in a silly horror film, 9 times out of 10, what they try to do with the CGI just doesn't get there. And you just kind of wish. So I guess I should have contextualized more of what I was talking about then, because that's typically what I'm seeing on a Friday afternoon.
Right.
I mean, what we're talking about is like budgetary limitations, right? And
definitely
there's again, like, it's all about deploying the tool. For me, it's all about choosing the right tool for the job and then using that tool effectively. And you're not wrong that there's a lot of really cheap CGI especially in low budget horror movies. But again, like, a lot of the time it feels like that's just to let the budget expand somewhere else, right? So anyway, I'm a little bit sorry that I sort of went too cranky on this.
You're allowed. You're allowed.
Hey, by the way, this sounds like a great episode of the Lambcast down the road, so I'm going to put this in my bag of tricks, and sometime in the fall we're going to have this discussion for the whole show.
Yeah, no, I like nice. The cranky stuff. Like, get me on an episode. Go back and listen to our episodes of the newer Ghostbusters films, like the 2016 and, you know, Frozen Empire, and you will hear cranky.
I'm going to be on Matt's side and even push it a little bit further. There was 6 production companies, 5 distribution companies. There's a lot of money in this movie. They had the budget. Don't let them fool you for 1 second saying that this is a low-budget film. You had all of these people. You had all those vanity cards. They're throwing all kinds of money around. The whole thing should have been CGI. It would have been phenomenal. But no, they don't want to spend their money.
Some of these companies threw their couch cushion change at this movie.
AI
That's
artwork.
What it is.
Oh, the AI. Yeah. So they were trying to put controversy on this movie. It's like, how dare you use AI art in this? And then I had to message Lisa, who's seen it before me. I was like, Lisa, where was the AI in this movie? And she was like, the title cards of the show when it went to the Be Right Back screens. That was the AI, and I didn't even notice it. Did anyone else catch that was the AI part besides Lisa, obviously?
I mean, it's not like a CGI thing. Yeah, it's not like it's a CGI thing where you're going to notice the quality of it. But yeah, I mean, they also could have hired somebody to do it. But I mean, the whole controversy surrounding this thing with the AI, they were in production for this film before any of the strike was happening, any of that information where they put into contracts and they put protections against using AI for the work that human beings are doing. So, you know, there's a lot of articles out there you can read where like Des Malkian addresses it and a number of production people address it. Just this idea that like, hey, we just needed these cards. We wanted it to look a certain way. You know, here we go. We're going to do this. And, you know, like the meat of this movie is done by people. So I think some of the squawking, I understand it's a slippery slope. I do get that. I'm an educator. I understand the slippery slope of using AI. but it's interesting the hullabaloo that came from this when it wasn't anything super big, and they also acknowledged quite a bit, like, no, we wouldn't do this again because it does take a job from someone, but they do elevate the number of people who did produce the special effects and the practical effects and whatever else was on there. So
nobody is bitching about it when I insert my AI images into the video version of the show. That's because I'm not unemploying anybody, because I'd have never employed somebody to do it. I can't do it myself. I'd try and steal an image off of the internet, and if I can't find it, okay, time for artificial intelligence to come in and save the day. I'm going to hell, I know.
Straight there in a handbasket.
I'm going to hell for different reasons, Richard, so I applaud your efforts. All right.
I think my problem with the AI imagery is a different one, and I don't want to go too long because I've already had my cranky moment on the show. But
no, by all means, go be cranky.
My problem,
crank it up, dude.
My problem with AI art isn't that it's. I mean, I have two problems. One, I just think they should have paid someone to do it. Like, I'm pretty against that. Like, elimination of labor is a whole thing, and I have the same opinion about like self-checkouts at stores. They should just be paying someone to do that. But anyway, my other problem though is that, have you looked at the AI images? Have you looked at the title cards? Because they have the same problem that all AI art has, which is that, like, as long as you're only glancing at it, it's sort of okay. But as soon as you actually look at it, it's horrifyingly bad.
Can you tell me can you specify on this? Because I did look at them. I had a student who was making her own children's book, and we were trying to come up with some AI images because she wasn't sure about taking photographs. And it was amazing because you look at children in softball uniforms with like third arms and like ponytails that are coming out their forehead, and it was hilarious. We had a great laugh. But can you tell me specifically in these cards where there were problems? Because I didn't catch them, and I may not have looked long enough.
So in particular, if you look at the one that is like the Night Owls Halloween one that has like the skeleton that's like dancing and there's a number of pumpkins around it, just look at the hands. Just look at the hands and the skeleton, and look at the rib cage and the skeleton, and look at the faces in the pumpkin. You can sort of write off as a bit like, oh, that's artistic style, but like it's not a human skeleton. Let's put it that way. Like, it's not. It's the.
I'm Googling as we speak.
AI art is sort of good in the macro, but fails in the micro, you know? Like, and there's just, I feel like if a human had drawn it, the hands would at least look like hands.
Well,
just as a side question, and this is, it just occurred to me because I'm sitting here looking at this, I'm going, yeah, it's better to employ people on this. But they use stock footage all the time, and they use stock footage in this of the SLA shootout. You know, that's denying actors a job. You know, they could have recreated the a shootout with the real Abraxas cult someplace and hired actors and shot a sequence where that take place. But instead, they plug in the stock footage. Is that something? You know, if we're talking about you know what is right or ethical. Isn't that denying somebody a job also?
But stock footage availability still gets some money to the artist, correct? Oh, thank you, Matt, for dropping that in the chat. I was going to go look for it. I was actually bringing up the movie to skim for it. Like when you have stock photographs online on websites like Pexels and Shutterstock and whatever, you have people who have sold their work for the purposes of making it available to others. So there was still money exchanged somewhere for that work in the meantime. Whereas this never went to it, is what I think would be the argument.
Well, if I just paid for the AI, would that be the argument? Would it stop being an argument if I had to pay for the AI?
So the argument for me is that if you're a person who's making stock footage for the purposes of selling it, let's just argue, for argument's sake, let's say that you're like basically shooting B-roll for films, like B-roll stock footage specifically for films, which is a bit of a narrowing of the subject, but the point is that, like, it still takes a person to go out and shoot it. It still takes a person with an eye for the shot to go out and get the shot, to recognize the things that are going to be useful for the target audience, and then to shoot them and shoot them well and edit them well and make them look good. And AI can't do any of that. It can only loosely approximate things. It can only draw on existing material and remix it into something new. Or something, not even new is the wrong word, because it can only remix it into something that looks like something that came before. And it's a very fancy, very long-winded way of saying it's just sort of faking it. And it never quite works. Like,
and by the way, I don't want to sound like I'm the advocate of AI on this show.
Devil's advocate.
I'm freaked out by AI all the time. You know, when my phone updated and they included the AI on it, I'm going, how do I get rid of this? What do I do? Because I sure as hell don't need any of that in my life.
No,
yeah, I guess I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make it seem like you're the advocate or anything. I'm just saying that, like, basically just what I said is that AI can't create. You can't send an AI into the field and be like, give me the perfect shot. It's just not able to do it. It's able to approximate it. But it's only able to do that by looking at things people have done before and doing them, and then like just tweaking that, right? Like, it's effectively, biased by the training data that's been used and remixing the training data that's been used. There's no like original creation there. And I find that comes through a lot of the time. Like, a lot of the time, it really comes through. And most of the time when I see, I would say actually pretty much all the time when I see AI art at this point, I'm just like, you just have to look at the hands, man. It's always the hands. Like, and if you see what looks like a stock photo with people with hands in their pockets, look at like the eyes and teeth and stuff, because chances are they prompted it that way to avoid you having to see the hands. Anyway, I could rant about this for a long time, so I'm going to stop.
Okay, yeah, I just remember that was like a big thing about this movie was the AI part. So I'm glad we got to talk about that a little bit. That's awesome. Is there anything that anyone wants to talk about that we haven't covered yet about the movie? Is there anything that we have not touched on yet? Anyone want to throw anything else in?
Well, I want to single out Ingrid Torelli as Lily. Apparently this was her first film, and I thought she was creepy as all hell from the very beginning. Forget all of the makeup and that part of the thing. She's got the eyes and the walk and the smile that makes you feel chilled before any of the supernatural stuff starts happening.
She had all those scenes where, like, every time the camera would switch, she would be looking dead on at that camera. And it would be just like a moment before it went to that camera. I don't know if anyone else caught that, but like she would just be constantly following the camera. And yeah, it was really a creepy, performance. And yeah, I'm surprised this was her first film. That's really surprising. She was really good in this.
Yeah, it's unnerving, and it's what keeps you on your toes through most of the film, because we all know where it's headed, or at least we have an idea we know where it's headed because of, snippets from the trailers and just in general. At some point, something's going to pop up, and it's going to be horrific, and it's going to be demonic, but we just don't know what form it's going to take. So for different things to keep popping up, like conspiracy theory stuff or Abraxas stuff, or, like Jason just pointed out how she's looking at the camera a certain way, like how is it going to reveal itself? And then when it kind of does, it's still really rewarding, but it's also that unease all the way to that.
I also it was a little bit both annoyed and enjoying when they reported the first weekend's box office returns, because I know that that's manipulated, but it was a funny little bit to do. Did you guys see that?
I don't think so.
No, I did. It was
the estimated return was $666,666.
Yeah, sure.
That was a hell of a coincidence.
Yeah, seriously. Or
I did not
was
see
it?
that. I did not see that. Anyone else got anything else?
This is more of a stylistic thing for me. I get why they would change up how the film looked, like when they were like, hey, we'll take a commercial break, and then they cut to and it's like behind the scenes and what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of felt like we didn't need for it to be that like bluish gray, black and white looking kind of thing. Not that it like took me out of the film or like had to really separate the show. I just feel like they could have done something a little bit different with that, with the like in between behind the scenes stuff and just how it was presented. I like overall how it was presented, but I think that part I was just like, let's go back to the other thing that we're doing. So
yeah, those scenes sort of took me out of the movie. If I had to do a negative, it's going to be that, because I get that they're trying to build up the story of like what's happening in the movie, and the whole crux of the film is, this is an episode of a TV show. We're watching a tape of it. But then we're also going to randomly cut to this behind the scene footage that they just so happen to be filming on this night. And it would always be so jarring because it would just go from the color to black and white. And then, and then it would be like the story of what's happening is going on. And it always took me out whenever it went to that. I don't know how they could have done it, really. So it's not a major complaint, but I sort of wish it was just the TV show aspect of it. Like it was just the episode, and maybe like we don't get answers to the behind the scenes stuff as much. Like we try to deduce it as the episode is going along. Like, they throw in more hints about Jack being in that secret club, and, someone accuses him of something, or something like that. And this was all happening on air. I kind of wish it was more like that, but I get why they did what they did, just for the sake of the story and the plot. So I'm not too mad about it. But that's like my one complaint about it, and it's a very minor complaint.
And Richard, you had said early. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Richard. You speak.
I was just going to say, they had that big data dump at the beginning in that 8-minute sequence where they're giving us all the exposition that you need ahead of time. But there are things that happen during the show that you don't want to have on the show, like the fact that Christo dies in the ambulance afterwards. We wouldn't know that except that somebody had to have that in the story, and the only way to get that in the story is to do this backstage kind of thing. Now, that makes sense. And I do like the idea that it's pretty simple that we have color when we're on camera going into the television, and black and white when we're at the backstage stuff. I didn't think there was any explanation of why there was that difference. I didn't hear a reference to they were shooting a documentary using older camera equipment, backstage, or why we would have had that. They just kind of used that technique without giving it a justification in the film. That I can see as being a little bit problematic, because the truth of the matter is some of the conversations that Jack and his producer have, wouldn't be something that they would be filming anyway. So right. It's just. There's exposition that they got to get into the film somehow, but they don't want to do it. There's no way to do it when it's on camera, with the guests and the host doing the show. Would it have been a cooler concept to do the whole thing as if it was just the TV show and we cut out everything else? Yeah, I just don't know that you could figure out how to get some of that back material in.
Well, some of Richard was saying earlier in the intro that, some of that stuff was dull or maybe it dragged through. I'm of the opposite thought, and I know, Jason, you're not so much a fan of it either. I liked that backstage stuff. You don't know about Gus's weariness about what's going to be happening. You don't get his personality of, his Christian background and how he's like, this is a bad idea. We should not be doing this. I'm really not comfortable with this kind of stuff up front. You don't get any of that with his on-screen persona. When the sirens sound, and they can apparently hear that in the studio, which, okay, suspension of disbelief. They're in New York. Of course you're going to hear a siren. But because we know that Christo is so seriously hurt and that he's, likely to die at that point, we don't know yet. But that siren, when he pauses, has more effect with us. Because otherwise we just think, it's just a siren in New York City. That's nothing. I thought that stuff was all really relevant. I wasn't a fan of the producer all that much. He kind of aggravated me. But, I liked seeing everybody else backstage. I liked sort of this, Jack Delroy off stage, what he's willing to do in order to make sure that he gets the good ratings for this particular show. And I don't know, I Memento is one of my top 5 favorite films. I have no problem with the black and white versus color. It doesn't impact me much at all. So I just wanted to say that, I'm a little more pro backstory. And yeah, again, horror fan, I'm really good at the suspension of disbelief. I'm not going to worry about the fact that, there's no reason why any of this would have been filmed. But sure, I'll let this go. Why not? Well, but it's because it was a fancy episode and they wanted to document it. Sure, I'll put that in my head.
Well, I mean, it does get referenced like at the beginning about like the things that that we see, like, oh, they, this was such a special night that Jack hired a film crew to record the behind the scenes stuff. But then it's like, if that was the case, why would they be having the conversations that they had if they know that they're being recorded? So it's a little weird. It like I said, it doesn't ruin the movie for me or anything. I still love it. It's just the one thing that kind of like jars me out of like, oh yeah, okay, this is happening now. And I'm okay with that being just a me thing. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, anyone else with anything else?
No, I'll chime in and say that my I don't have a problem with the behind the scenes stuff, but I have the same problem with it that I have with most found footage films. And to be fair, I like a lot of found footage films. I don't think this is necessarily a deal breaker. I just think that like it's a conceit that needs to be abandoned in the third act every time, right? Like for the climax, which I don't want to spoil, but involves like someone having a vision that no one else is having, we still see it.
Right.
So, right, like you can't. It doesn't seem like you can have a found footage film that is found footage from start to end. Like even great versions of found footage films, like say District 9, abandon it in the third act.
Absolutely.
And again, this is not a deal breaker. It's just something that sort of I notice every time. And again, maybe I'm just having a cranky morning, but I definitely noticed it this time too. But it's not a deal breaker. Like this is still a great movie. Like it's just a sort of it's a thing that the format, that the genre hasn't worked out yet, even though we've been doing this for decades now.
All right, I'm thinking out loud here for a second because I'm a little conflicted about it. Do you think that the moment that they have with the videotape of Carmichael's hypnotism bit versus the bit that they have where Lily is actually possessed, and they kind of show the two things being different, does that validate or does that invalidate what happens at the end of the movie?
What do you mean by validate? Does it prove that it's real?
Yeah. Does it make what happens at the end of the movie feel like it could have been recorded and so it's okay that it's that way? Or does it kind of undermine, well, wait a second, we wouldn't have seen this if this didn't really happen? Like I said, I'm
all for it.
I'm just kind of thinking in my head about what's going on here, and I haven't worked it out for myself. It just popped in my head while we were talking about this.
No, I'm sort of with you, because that is sort of the problem for me, right? That like if we have seen that bit at the end is the question, and I don't think that we necessarily would have.
But why? Because that was what was. Am I forgetting what we're talking about at the end here? Like the film ends with her. I'm not without going too into it, but like it ends on her, and we would have seen that because it was what went to air. Everything that we see is like
they're talking about the thing that Jack sees, like the big spinning wheel, the wife on the bed.
Oh, I see what you mean.
There's a big extended sequence, like vision sequence.
Okay, I wasn't sure what you meant.
Yeah, and I'm not. I didn't want to spoil it at all because I think it is actually legitimately a great sequence. It's really well put together, really well conceived, really well performed. But it's not clear to me whether we would have seen it. Like, are we omniscient viewers or are we in the audience? Because the movie seems to switch back and forth between those two things.
Right. And no, you're absolutely right.
So that inconsistency is one of the few things I didn't like about the movie.
I mean, for me, it's not something that gives me a problem because as a reader, it happens a lot. You change your point of view and you're able to move more based on what the author wants you to see. I'm a big fan of ergodic novels where you're dealing with that shift and a little bit of found footagey reading. is essentially what I'm talking about. Like, are you reading a screenplay? Are you reading this person's diary? Are you reading a narrative of what kinds of things are happening? Are you in one person's brain? Are you seeing objectively? So I think I'm a little bit more forgiving of those inconsistencies, I think, just because I like what's happening and I'm willing to take that trip. And so you're
but just
right.
to be clear, this is the minorest of nitpicks.
Oh, no, totally. I'm with you on that.
It is not a deal breaker.
Yeah, and I'm not, please forgive me, I didn't want to sound like I'm coming at you for it at all, but it sounds to me like it's like a Jane Austen free and direct discourse. Like, in the moment of a conversation, you jump from like Lizzie Bennet's head to Mark Darcy, that's a Bridget Jones, to Mr. Darcy's head, and then back again, like just for a moment to give you the other side of what's happening in that situation. And so the idea that we become, I never feel, forgive me, my brain is doing too many things at once. This film is purported to set you, the viewer, up as an audience member watching it at home. I disagree. I look at it as I'm somebody who may have watched it live, but chances are I'm watching this as a historical document because, frankly, that's what I am. I'm not old enough to have been watching it live. So I'm looking at it as, okay, this is a documentary that was put together. They found, not a documentary, but they found the tape, the master tape of what went to air, plus they spliced in these behind the scenes moments. And so I'm looking at it as, okay, here is what filmmaker has put together for me, whoever it is that decided to splice all this together for God knows what reason. And the idea that I'm watching what they're giving me, the fact that you can see what's happening in Jack Delroy's brain, yes, it's completely ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. There's no possible way any of that would have been on film. So I'm with you on that, Matt, where you're like, this whole thing falls apart as far as found footage in the third act. That being said, I want to know what's going on in everybody else's head, so I'm happy. But I do. I'm rambling. Forgive me. It's what I do.
It's okay.
I like all of it. I like all of it. So when it comes to negatives, I tend to be like, well, because I like it, I don't want to talk about the negatives. But yeah, I mean, if we're going to look at this as far as narrative structure, as far as point of view, as far as how all of this actually gets put together, it is problematic.
It's a little flexible.
Yes, there it is. And I'm willing to flex it because I have such a good time with it.
I think I'm being perfectly honest here. I had never thought about it until 10 minutes ago when it came up as part of the conversation, because I'm just thinking about the movie that I saw. Now, thinking about it more, if we were writing this as a screenplay and somebody came up with this and said, okay, give me a rationalization or an explanation for this, what I would be doing is I'd be saying, well, it was said earlier in the film that anybody who witnesses these rites then becomes, capable of being possessed by the demon. That's all that's happened. We've seen these things, and so now we are seeing what the demon wants us to see.
That too.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
I can create a rationalization as good as anybody.
I love it.
Has anybody seen any of the other films done by these directors?
Nope, not familiar.
I don't think so. I'm going to look now because I haven't actually delved into that. No, I have not.
They're horror films for the most part, right?
Yes, it looks that way. Well, no, is this their first directing?
They don't seem to have a Wikipedia, so.
Well, I'm on IMDb and I'm looking Cairn. How would you say this name?
Scare Campaign.
Cairn.
Yeah, I haven't
and
seen
Bloody
Scare
Acres.
Campaign. Nope, haven't seen either of these.
No, yeah.
So.
No, I've seen nothing. They're all like TV episodes for the most part, and then you're right, 100 Bloody Acres and Scare Campaign. I have not seen either of them.
Well, sometime between the scares.
That sort of makes sense though, because they are Australian, are they not? Like this might be their breakout into American audiences.
Scare Campaign is my kind of thing, though. A group of people who run a TV show where they set up locations to scare people. Yup, that's going on the list.
Yeah.
That's absolutely
too,
going on the list.
A lot of the performers in this, we mentioned before, like it didn't feel like it was full of famous people, but I'd be willing to bet. I haven't looked up, but this is a very Australian production. I would be willing to bet a lot of these people are, medium to big deal Australian names.
Oh yeah, a
Could
couple
be.
of people that were in Late Night with the Devil show up in Scare Campaign. Like a couple of the people, like the producers in Scare Campaign. I don't know what this guy did, but yeah, there's some shared actors in between. So
Not really easily accessible either. You got to pay for them.
yep. All right. Anything else? Any last minute things here? Cool. All right. That was Late Night with the Devil. I'd watch that show.
Well, I want to thank Jason for suggesting this. It was a popular choice when it came to the voting. It got almost 60% of the votes for Movie of the
Nice.
Month.
Ooh.
So, of course, there were only 3 choices, and they all got votes. But this one was the overwhelming winner if you hadn't looked at the stats on the website. So I want to thank Jason for putting it forward and for hosting the discussion. We're going to return after a few words from our sponsors.
Hi, I'm Jason Soto.
And I'm Lisa Leaheey.
And we're the host of Between the Scares, a podcast that takes a look at every movie that Blumhouse Productions has made. You may not recognize the name, but they have made some of your favorite horror movies like Paranormal Activity, Ouija, and Insidious.
Yeah, Jason, but they've also made stupid movies like The Fever and Best Night Ever and Hysterical Blindness.
Yeah, those two. But they also did Whiplash, Get Out, and Us. And we're going to cover it all.
Hey, did you know that Jason Blum also produced that Gem and the Holograms live-action movie?
He did that?
Uh-huh.
Ugh. Fine. But then you have to watch The Green Inferno. So listen to Between the Scares on Anchor, Apple, Google, Amazon, or our home location at rabbitholepodcast.com.
We're back, and after hearing from that sponsor, I know that we all want to be done with the show. Our exit question this week is real simple. What horror movie did you see that made you a horror film fan? We want people to tell us their story. You know, what floated your boat when you were 12 and you saw something that said, this is my life, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of the time when I'm in the dark in a theater? What film did you see when you were in college that said, this is art, why am I not watching these movies because they are artistic? I'm sure somebody has a movie that turned them on to horror films that they want to talk about and they want to tell us their story, and I'm giving all of our people on the show today a chance to do that. Lisa, I know that you are our horror maven on the show, so we're going to give you the chance to start.
And what's ironic is I really struggled with this question. I was the kind of kid who was terrified of everything. My mother would watch a movie that had slightly creepy music, and I'd have nightmares for a week. I used to listen to the radio to go to sleep at night, and when they were airing commercials for Friday the 13th 8, Jason Goes to Manhattan, I would get freaked out by them. So that's what made me stop listening to the radio as I went to sleep. I remember as a kid watching Poltergeist and putting a towel over the TV because I thought that would prevent the ghost from coming out to get me. And then seeing Poltergeist 3 and putting a towel over the mirror that hung on my closet door because that will prevent them from coming out to get me. Somewhere along the way, the best I can give you, because I was also obsessed with going at the grocery store, they had this little video rental section, and I would always go and I was always pulled toward the horror section, even though I couldn't handle them, but I would look at the cover boxes and I'd be looking at the stuff in the back and the scenes from the movie, and it always sort of had my attention. I loved Bunnicula as a kid. I loved scary stories to tell in the dark. So I was sort of always destined, but I just couldn't handle it until a certain point. The best I can give you are the Stephen King miniseries from the 90s. I am pretty secure that I didn't see it when it aired in 1990, but I know for a fact I watched The Stand when it aired in 1994. And these Stephen King miniseries were events in my home. They would start on a Sunday night and you'd have 2 hours, and then you'd have Monday night, and then depending on the length of the thing, you might get Tuesday, and then they skip to Thursday, which is what I remember The Stand doing. But the Tommyknockers was 1993, and I don't know if I watched some of it or not. I have very fond memories for that miniseries, even though it's terrible. But I can tell you for certain, I watched 1994's The Stand. I am still a huge fan, and I am unapologetically a fan of the 1997 The Shining. And I don't care who comes at me because it's better adaptation from the book, and I will stand by that. Then you have Storm of the Century in 1999. I mean, these movies are such a big deal in my house that this is when I really went full tilt. And I know my first rated R movie in the theater was Interview with the Vampire, and that was, 94? So it's probably right around then that I finally got myself in and said, all right, I'm a horror fan. This is what I'm going to do. And just sort of dove in from there, I think. So I'm going to put it on the Stephen King miniseries is what got me into horror.
Cool. You know, I think the Tommyknockers is available on Laserdisc.
Is it? I have it on DVD. I have them all on DVD. My manager at Blockbuster, when The Shining came out, because I lost my mind over it, I wanted it so bad. When it finally came out on DVD, they sent the store one copy. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so she actually put in the computer that it was damaged, gave me the copy, and then ordered a new one. So I have it. I have that movie on DVD.
Excellent.
Oh, wow. That's really sweet.
Yeah, she was good people.
That's what we like. I like those kinds of stories. Matthew, you got a story like that?
I actually really struggle with this as well because, for a long time I would have considered myself a horror wuss, but then, when I was doing some looking back and reflecting, I realized that I have loved horror movies since I was a kid, and probably the one that did it for me is in the 80s. There were several movies that my parents had on VHS that I was just not supposed to watch, not allowed to watch, that through various means I was able to watch because I got to sleep sometime. And I think the one that probably did it for me was Alien. And I'm pretty sure that it was one of the ones alongside Terminator and RoboCop in particular are two of the other films I remember seeing when I was far too young.
Too young to be seeing that stuff.
Yeah, for context, I was born in 81, so I would have been watching these on VHS in the mid-late 80s when I was, 6, 7, 8, 10 maybe into 91. And what would happen is that my cousins would come to visit where we lived. Because we lived in a place where my grandparents lived next door. And so my aunts and uncles would come to visit, and they'd bring their kids, my cousins, and I was still am about 10 years younger than most of them. And so these 17-year-olds would come to my dad and be like, hey, can we borrow RoboCop or can we borrow Aliens? And they'd be like, of course, you're old enough. And then I'd be like, can I go watch? And they'd be like, no. And then they turn their back and I would go watch because they would be watching it at the next house down.
Yes, there you go.
So that is sort of my intro to horror movies and action movies and basically everything you're supposed to see. There's types of movies you should see when you're 10 that you really aren't old enough to see. So my cousins are responsible for that for me.
I like it.
And I'm thankful to them to this day.
I like it. Be sure and send them a card thanking them for that because they probably don't know it.
Yeah, they probably don't. I should probably tell them.
Nick, you got a story?
I do, yeah. I'm not a horror film fan, at all, still, now, to this day. But I always averted it because I was just a scared little kid. Still am. I remember reruns and seeing, Pet Sematary on TV and, hiding behind my mom and, peeking over her shoulder as it's going on. And they're being we don't have to watch this. If you want to go do something else, it's no, let's watch this movie. So I've always just been kind of afraid that way. But when I started hanging around the French Toast Sunday gang and podcasting with them, they were kind of pushing the boundaries for me on what is scary and what scary films can be. And the biggest one I think for me was they decided to hold a Wan-a-thon where they were going to watch every film that James Wan had did at that point in order of release. So I watched Silence, the one with the puppet. I'm okay, this isn't so bad. There was another one.
That's a great one.
Yeah, there was another one, and then there was Insidious. Now, Insidious is where it really got me because it's that moment where they're sitting at a table, and all of a sudden it cuts to, and there's just that red demon thing over the shoulder. I mean, I'm talking jumping off the couch, screaming. They're laughing, having a good time.
Of course.
They come on, stick through, and it made me feel like a kid. Like this is what I should have been doing, like in high school, like hanging with a bunch of friends and like watching stuff that really I can't handle. But no, you can handle it, and you can do it when you're with your friends. So I think having them by my side, like, kind of helped me push through that until we got to The Conjuring. We were about 15 minutes or so in, and when those hands come out of the cupboard in the beginning and clap, I was like, all right, I'll see you guys later. And I got up, and I left. And to this day, never finished that movie.
Oh, I would love a one-a-thon. Like, I love what that man does. Him and Lee Winnell, or Vinnell, however you say his name. Whatever he writes, I'm in. He's so good.
And and I think seeing films like that and then talking about those directors as well, and they would talk about like Ty West and some other things that were kind of underground of that time. This is, 2012 through 2015 and that kind of era. And that kind of pushed me to, and now I'm looking at like some of the classics and stuff. Recently, I started watching the Halloween films, watching the Jason films. I just watched, what is it? The Exorcist for the first time, I think back in like September or August or something. Oddly enough, with my mom, but I'm jealous
you get to watch it for the first time.
Right, I would love to see that for the first time.
Because that is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I think one of the only movies that to this day still actually scares me.
Well, there were some moments in there where I was like, man, this is nuts, and I'm looking over and then seeing my mom like almost kind of hiding her hands. I was like, all right, cool, like I'm glad I'm not the only, but it just like having that experience. And then I think the more I go to watch horror, the more I kind of want to have people around me. But the bad side of that is when there's like a not as strong horror film or not a quote unquote good horror film, and it's just like jump scary, and I'll just start talking my way through not being scared. So it does backfire on occasion. But when a horror film is done really, really well, Midsommar comes to mind, Hereditary comes to mind, something that's just engrossing and enthralling, and I'm terrified but can't look away. I'm finding more and more that's what I'm into. I saw the TV Glow 2 days ago. And there was a trailer for this film called Cuckoo that's coming out, or Cuckoo, or however you want to phrase it. It looks absolutely terrifying, and I don't want to see it because I think it's going to scar me, but I kind of want to see it because it looks just absolutely terrifying at the same time. So I'm coming out of my shell, and I think I'll eventually become that horror person, but for now I'm just baby steps.
I love the honesty of your discussion here just now, because I think everybody goes through those stages at some point or other. It's like you kind of have to creep into it. You're hiding behind the blanket. You're watching through your fingers. You're hoping that there are other people there. There are nightmares that come along that you and sometimes you just say, nope, that's going to be too much for me. I can't do that at all. And maybe you come back to it later, maybe you don't. I think that's most people's story, and I appreciate you sharing yours.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't mind, I got just a small anecdote
Sure.
on top of that.
Sure.
When they used to do midnight releases of films, my cousin and I would go, and one time we were running late, and he's like, I'll get the tickets, don't worry about it. I'm like, what are we seeing? He's like, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine. So we get to the theater, and it's packed because it's opening night, and what are we seeing? Paranormal Activity, front row.
Yes.
Absolutely terrified me. The stairwell scene still haunts me to this day. We get back to our house, or my house. He was my neighbor at the time. And I'm like, you want to hang out and play video games or something, man? I don't want to go to bed right now. And he's like, no, I'm going to go hang out with my girlfriend. But left, I'm by myself, slept with the lights on for, I think, 3 weeks. Like, that was...
Oh, man.
The fact that he was comfortable going to sleep with the girlfriend, because I saw Paranormal Activity in the theater upon those opening weeks, and people were leaving the theater telling their girls, they're like, you're sleeping on the couch tonight. Like, they were all freaked out by it. It was amazing.
I'm curious, Nick, have you gotten to Sinister yet? Have you seen Sinister?
Is Sinister the one with Ethan Hawke?
Yes, in the home movies.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
And it was rough.
Because you were mentioning the jump scares, because that movie has one of the best executed jump scares, in certainly modern cinema history.
I hated it. I know exactly what moment you're talking about, and I hated every second of it.
That film is that moment is the only film that I can come up with where I involuntarily turned away from the screen. Like, I had no control whatsoever. Like, I turned my head and I was like, holy crap, I can't remember the last time a movie did that. Yeah, yep. Incredible.
So good.
This was clearly the right question to be asking for the end of the show this week. Excellent. Jason, after you're all done with all of the Bloom films, are we going to have a wonderful podcast?
Probably not.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Nick, you and I can do it.
There we go. It's a wonderful life, huh?
That's
there you go.
Yes. Done.
You have to do it because of that title. If you don't do it, somebody else is going to steal it.
That's true.
And because he does a Fast and Furious movie, so we're in.
Oh.
Go ahead, Jason. Tell us your story.
All right. Well, I mean, basically just my life, because my mom went and saw Friday the 13th when she was pregnant with me, and they kept saying the name Jason over and over and over again, and she was like, that's kind of a cool name for a kid. I'll name my kid that. And then little did she know what was going to happen every year after that. So obviously I had to gravitate towards the Friday the 13th films. And I'm a huge fan of those. Those are probably what makes me. But I dig them, and I'm probably like the only one who champions like all of them. Even the really stupid ones, like Part 7, where Jason goes against the psychic lady. I admit it's a little silly, but people mock it because it's like really there's a lady who's psychic, but it's kind of fun. And then Part 8 gets a lot of gruff, especially for me because it's called Jason Takes Manhattan, but it's really like the last 20 minutes of the movie is in Manhattan.
It's my favorite one.
Mostly it's just Jason on a boat. It's basically just Jason. Take a cruise with Jason. It's the Jason cruise.
In a lake.
1989 cruise of Jason Voorhees, and but it's got one of the best kills in any of the series, which is he just simply punches a guy's head off of his body, and it is seriously like top-notch kill, seriously. And then
you had to see the look that Kane Hodder gave me when I asked him to sign that DVD at a Comic-Con and told him that one was my favorite. The look this man gave me.
I'm sure he appreciated it. I'm sure he
thinks
appreciated it. But for me, my favorite is Part 6. Like, hands down, Friday the 13th Part 6 is my favorite. Because it's basically like an airplane movie, but it's Friday the 13th instead. Because there's just all this goofy shit just happening in the movie, and it's like you're waiting for Leslie Nielsen to pop up and be like, surely he's not gonna stab me with the machete, and it's like, I am gonna stab you with the machete, and don't call me Shirley. So go check out Part 6. It's gonna be worth your time.
Oh, I like it. If I had a favorite Friday the 13th, I would tell you what it was. I saw the first one when you did your podcast a few years ago. I think I watched 3 or 4 of them so I could listen along with the podcast. The only other one that I remember seeing, I went to see because it had a guest appearance by the DJs that I listen to every day, and that's Friday the 13th, Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell. And in their sequence, they play security guards or cops, and Jason smashes their heads together.
Yes.
And they explode. Yes. And I saw the movie
really?
Because they were in it, and I listened to that show regularly.
Now, I'm going to tell you, when Jason Goes to Hell was in theaters, it was like 1989, I think, or 88. And I was 8 years old, and when your name is Jason, and then there's a movie that's out being advertised called Jason Goes to Hell, your school life becomes a little intolerable. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. It's a little rough, yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, horror movies were not something, I saw all of the the Universal movies, on television. Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, all those kinds of things.
You were setting yourself up for an old joke right there.
Yeah, no,
it was ready. I'm like, when I saw the Universal movies in the theater.
Yeah, no, I didn't see them in the theater. Thank you.
Milk was a nickel.
Yeah, it was a nickel, and I had to turn the crank myself.
Did you also wear an onion on your belt? That was the style at the time.
That's it. There you go. But when I was a kid, kids would see movies that they would talk about that were horror movies, and they'd be talking about them in school. And I remember them talking about The Pit and the Pendulum, and thinking, "Gosh, I really wish I could see that movie," and I never got a chance to see it when I was a kid. And then there were, the giant monster movies that we'd see on late night Saturday horror film kinds of things, and I saw a few things like that. But the one that did it for me, that I saw in a theater, and I said, this is something, because I liked the effect it had on me. I liked being creeped out in the theater. I liked being scared a couple times. Was Willard in 1971, the rat movie, and it's got Bruce Davison and Ernest Borgnine in it, and Elsa Lanchester is in it, the Bride of Frankenstein herself. She's in it briefly. And I just remember thinking how creepy it was that all those rats being in the same place at the same time, and that felt real to me. And I'd heard about the movie The Birds, but never seen it. And some of the promos for that movie for Willard, use the, where the birds ends, Willard begins, that kind of stuff, trying to build up the horror thing on that. And that became my kind of gateway drug. After that, I made an effort to go see horror films in theaters. Before that, I'd see them on television, but when I saw that one in a theater, I said, this is something that I'm willing to do again and again and again. And over the years, of course, I have done so. I don't see everything. It's not so much that I'm discriminating. It's just I can see some stuff. I just go, yeah, I'm not interested in that. I'm not going to see the Tarot movie. It's just not something that I give a damn about.
You're not missing anything.
You say that now.
Yeah, well, maybe it'll turn out to be great. Maybe someday it'll show up.
No,
and
it's not. I'm telling you.
Okay, thank you. But like the Conjuring films, I've really liked those. That kind of stuff. And I held off on the Paranormal Activity ones. I did see the first couple of them later, like a decade after they came out, and I liked those very much. I thought they were good and creepy, and I probably should have seen them in the theater. But like I said, since 1971 and Willard, that's when I became kind of a horror movie fan. So old school stuff. Well, I want to thank you all for sharing your stories about your horror movie history, and I also want to thank you for joining us for this discussion. I had a very nice time, and I think our audience, look, you guys got more about the movie than you probably wanted if you haven't seen it yet, and if you have seen it, you probably have opinions. Feel free to share your opinions online, either on the YouTube channel or on the website when you listen to this podcast. I want to give our guests a chance to share what they are doing in their lives right now. So as we're finishing up here, Jason, have you got something that you want to promote?
Well, oddly enough, I do shows with both Lisa and Nick, so I'm going to let them talk about those shows. The one that I'm going to promote is probably one of my favorites that we do at Rabbit Hole Podcast, and that's the Bomb-Yo, 90 hella rad movies from the 90s. It's basically a celebration of movies that came out in the 1960s. It's a weird title. I don't know why I did that. No, it's the 90s. We cover 90s movies every other Tuesday. Me and a guest, we talk about a different movie that came out in the 90s. The one that just came out was me and Nick, actually, Nick Rehak, covering There's Something About Mary, where Nick finds a weird conspiracy theory in the movie that blows my fucking mind, and I don't understand how no one else saw that, so go check that out. And coming up next week, me and our pal Isabel is going to be talking about Spawn. So we will be doing that. So check that out anywhere you get podcasts or rabbitholepodcast.com.
I seem to be sending a lot of people to Rabbit Hole Podcasts on a regular basis. There's a lot of those things going on there. Lisa, tell us about your Rabbit Hole Podcasts and anything else that you want to share.
Sure. So I've got 2 to plug. I'll plug our Rabbit Hole Podcast book club, which is called Pictures and Conversations. And we recently, this month, talked about a film called This Is How You Lose the Time War. Ironically, I was unable to be on that episode. So if you want to listen to my podcast without me on it, check out that episode. Actually, that one drops tomorrow, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
So if you're checking this out, probably tomorrow or the day after, May 20th is when that episode drops. We drop the 20th of every month. And on June 20th, our episode will be on the giant kitten squisher type novel, The Priory of the Orange Tree. So if you like your fantasy, join us for that. Jason and I have also shifted gears because Jason got bored. We were working on Between the Scares, which you can go check some back episodes of. However, we are now gifting each other some horror films. We are doing the gift of horror, and we have put together a neat list of 26 films because there are 26 letters of the alphabet. Let's round it out. And we have put together subgenres. And each of us has a list of films under those subgenres. And because I love a randomizer, we use a coin flip to help us choose what the next subgenre will be. And we each gift each other a film. It's like Christmas with white elephant gifting. So check us out to see who gets the foot powder and deodorant and who gets the lotto tickets. Our most recent episode was focused on cursed objects, and we watched Kronos by Guillermo del Toro and Wish Upon. So see what's going on there and check out our next episodes.
Yep.
All right, we're still in the rabbit hole for a minute. Nick, have you got things that you want to promote?
Nah, I got nothing going on.
We only bring him out when we need him. We're going to stuff him back into the beer keg when we're done.
There's 2 programs that I'm fortunate enough to be a part of over at Rabbit Hole. One of them is Lyrical Innuendo. Bubba Wheat and myself take a look at some musical lyrics, and we determine, is the song really about what it's talking about, or is it about sex, drugs, or good old-fashioned rock and roll? A bit of a hiatus right now. There's a lot going on with Bubba Wheat and some of his projects and me and mine, so we're going to get back on track eventually, but there's still some great episodes there, some great tunes to get into. The other one is Play MST for me. Jason and myself have been watching every episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 from the beginning because I've never seen a single episode. Well, now I've seen a handful of them, but Jason is an uber fan. And each week, or every other week, we go through and watch an episode and talk about it, and we learn a little bit about ourselves along the way. He and I are bonding over some fantastic stuff. Steely Dan, Quesaritos, the list
baby.
goes on, dude. So, if you like laughter and you like the sound of Jason's voice, check it out.
Well, I don't know about the sound of Jason's voice. I do like laughter, and Quesaritos sounds interesting. Matthew, apparently you don't have anything on Rabbit Hole Podcast, but I know you've got a bucket load of other stuff that you can share with us. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm not in the rabbit hole, but now I feel left out. I write freelance for multiple different publications. So the easiest way to find all my writing is to go to my homepage, which is stretched.ca. And you can find reviews of Tales of the Empire, the latest Star Wars project, Dark Matter, the latest Apple TV show. I write a lot about a lot of TV shows lately, actually. Doctor Who, and a couple of reviews of some great new Canadian films, one called The King Tide and another one called Sweetland, which are incidentally by the same director and out within 2 weeks of one another, which is, he's 2 for 2 in 2 weeks, which is, I think, quite the thing. I also host the Awesome Friday podcast, which is a weekly podcast reviewing 2 new films each week. We're on a bit of a hiatus for personal reasons this week and last, but our most recent episode was covered both Abigail and The People's Joker. And you can find that anywhere you can find podcasts or at awesomefriday.ca.
Well, you mentioned Abigail. That's one of the films that I am slow to cover. I saw it a week ago, and I'm still trying to catch up on all of the films that I've seen in my on my site. I've got 2 or 3 that I need to catch up with. I was surprised that I saw 2 movies back to back with Kevin Durand, and my daughter is a big fan of his, and I appreciated the fact that he was in 2 movies. I haven't seen him in a movie in a long time, and I saw 2 of them back to back, so that was kind of fun. So there is a review of Abigail coming, and then of course I've got a review of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that needs to be done as well, but I'll get there eventually. One of the things that I am going to be doing in the near future is trying to relaunch some of the episodes of the Lambcast that got deleted. When I first took over the Lambcast, we ran into a situation where there was not enough storage space. I thought if I deleted a few episodes, we would be able to increase the storage space. I did that. It didn't work very well. I finally ended up swallowing the pill and paying for the website and getting unlimited space, but not before I'd eliminated probably 200 episodes of the Lambcast. And I'm planning on plugging them back in, but it requires Jay to send me the hard drive that he's got them stored on, and that is not happening immediately. But he did send me recently the episode on the Mummy, which I had done an entry on my site, and I wanted to have the link to the Mummy because it was Movie of the Month back in, I think, 2018, and I wanted to have that, and he sent that to me so I could plug it in there, and I did restore it to the Lambcast site, and I'm planning on doing that on all the other ones that I lost over the years as soon as I get that hard drive. So that's the big news here at the Lambcast that's going on. Once again, I want to thank my guests for joining us this week, and I would encourage anybody who has a suggestion for a movie of the month for June to send me their suggestions. It is the female-directed film for June that we're looking for, so if you haven't won a movie of the month so far this year, you are welcome to submit a film, and hopefully you're willing to host the show when your film is selected. All right. That brings us to a close for Late Night with the Devil. It was a hell of a show, and I expect that some of you will be looking at us in reruns. We'll catch you next time on the Lambcast. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, guys. I appreciate it very much.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Sit here in complete silence while we're waiting for Jason to get back.
We can if you want.
Oh, Nick, you can't engage in a little bit of small talk? I feel bad.
Richard, I got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
With your Laserdisc collecting and everything, if they started re-releasing Laserdiscs, like sometimes you have horror and indie films, they'll put them on like VHS, or
yes.
Some punk bands they'll put stuff on cassette tape. Would you pick up those Laserdiscs even if you don't necessarily care for that particular film?
Some of them, there are things that I like. If there was something that was like context-wise, it would be nice to have because of a nostalgia reference. Something from the that is a throwback, like Stranger Things. On VHS, I have seen. They sell that. Something like that on Laserdisc would probably work as well. Are you familiar with the big sleeve releases of Blu-rays?
Oh yeah, where it looked like record albums.
Yeah, they basically look like they're Laserdiscs. Only, of course, what you get inside are the Blu-rays, and then they have extra stuff in it like they used to have in a lot of packaging for Laserdiscs. So you get picture cards or some images from the film. They're really quite cool. I got as many of those as I could get my hands on.
Because it was a lot of the Marvel ones that did that, right? I remember Guardians was one of them.
Guardians and Guardians 2. I'm looking at it all right now up on my shelf. Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok. What pisses me off is on the Star Wars ones, they did Star Wars and they did The Last Jedi, but they didn't do the final one. And I've got Rogue One, but I didn't get the Solo movie because they didn't release that, and they also did a whole bunch of the Disney ones also. So, but because it was a Disney product, basically. Right. That's what happened. So they released a bunch of things that way, but it was they only sold them in Great Britain, and you had to import them.
Also, they aren't doing them anymore, are they?
No, no. They stopped.
I haven't heard of one recently.
This was like years ago.
I think Thor Ragnarok was the last one they did.
Right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, 2018, 2019 was the last year that they put any of those out.
Because I remember hearing about that, being like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then logistically, I'm thinking of it like, I've already got so many on my shelf, like it's not going to fit. Like, I'm okay with steel bookcases because it's just enough size to fit on that shelf and not have it look wonky. But, like, I love the A24 special editions, but, like, they don't fit on my shelf. The Godzilla Criterion Collection, that doesn't fit on my shelf. It becomes like a point of contention for me of like, I really want this, but, it doesn't fit.
Well, that's also true of some of those special sets where you get, like I have the Alien collection in the egg, that lights up, and that doesn't cool. That'll fit on a shelf, but it won't fit on a shelf between the DVDs or Blu-rays that I have. There's always stuff like that you have to try and accommodate, and I know what you mean. I literally am using the same tool that I use for putting my Laserdiscs up to display all the big sleeve Blu-rays here in my office that I have. What was it?
For me, it's just a space issue. Like,
yeah, no, it is.
Like I only recently got into buying movies again because I was stupid for a long time. And there was a time when I was young and had a huge collection of movies and CDs, and then circumstances ended up with me being kind of broke and living in a bachelor suite, and I divested of basically all of them. And there's several that I wish I never had, that I've never gotten rid of. And one of them is, though, like, of all the things I could still have, the one I would love to still have is that edition of the DVD release of the original Battlestar Galactica TV show where the box was a Cylon face.
Oh, that's cool.
There is nowhere to put that, though.
No.
It was like a foot square. It's like a foot cube. There's nowhere to put it. But I wish it's one of the only ones I'm like, I should never have gotten rid of that, ever. It's just so good.
Yeah, my life is full of regrets of things that I dumped because of space, and I go, why did I do that? Now I wish I had it.
Yeah, and then like eventually when you do have space and you have room to have like a nice setup of shelves, I actually think it's really cool to have like your, if you have like a wall, my sort of like pipe dream at this point is to have a space big enough where I have like a wall that's just shelves of movies, and I think it would be awesome if that shelf was punctuated by things like that Cylon face, or like that alien egg, or even like that really terrible Amazing Spider-Man 2 Electro head, which is like a bad movie, but I'm sort of like, that thing is like my white whale for no good reason. It's terrible.
Hey, I'm all about the packaging. So all about the packaging.
Yeah, that's actually why like a lot of my new collection is like Steelbooks and Criterions and Arrow Video Special Editions.
Yeah, exactly.
And because my opinion, my preference is that at least as much thought be put into the package as the movie itself. And also I want the ones that have all the special features.
Yes.
There's nothing more disappointing than picking up a gorgeous Steelbook that has nothing on it except the movie.
It's a bummer.
Yeah.
Jason,
looking at you, Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon.
That was, of all of them.
I like it.
Head, I'm like, what's he gonna say?
Now, did the original release have extras?
Next time you're doing a movie of the month, let's put Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon on the floor.
Okay, we'll do that. I will ask, by the way. I
think Nick is gonna keel over.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.